Hey everyone, it's Emily, and I am here with my really, really, really good friend, my best friend, and longtime partner in crime in business. People are going to think I'm talking about Jamie. I'm here with Sarah
It's not
Harmon,
Jamie.
who, yeah, hopefully you listen to the intro where we give our big proper introduction, but I know a lot of people who know NAPS and follow us and come to our events or listen to our content might be familiar with Sarah already because we do a lot with you through NAPS. But for those of you who don't know Sarah, I'll just give you a quickie. We've been friends for so long. And I always say friends right before business. We've been friends for so long, but as our businesses have evolved, we do so much together. And Sarah's a licensed mental health counselor and mindfulness and yoga instructor. You're the founder and owner of two businesses, the School of Mom and the Parent Wellness Group, which is insane. We'll have you tell people about those more. They're wonderful resources. And you're a mom to two girls, and our girls love to hang out together. So you're just like a wealth of knowledge, and I'm so excited. You've been on the podcast before. You come to our pre-baby boot camp. You run free bonus sessions in our mom support groups. You do so much for NAPS. But we can never have too much Sarah Harmon. We just can't never have too much Sarah Harmon.
Oh my God. Thank you. I am so happy to be here. When you asked me to come on, I was like, are you kidding me? I could chat with you and Jamie all day long. Like, yes. Like,
Well, it is a problem.
Oh, and people
right?
are going to listen?
We could do that, right? So we'll get really, really clear on what we want to talk about today. Because you and me left alone, we could go. This podcast could end up being hours long.
Yes, true. True. Thank you so much for having me.
I know. And so for everyone listening, I reached out to Sarah because I feel that a common theme that I'm running into with my clients, my moms in my MSG groups, and even like myself a little bit right now is sort of like how we get to this place. We have highs and lows in parenting, but how we get to this place where we're doing all the things, we're trying to be amazing at all the things. And all of a sudden, without even realizing it, we just start to set our expectations like too high. Like we put really high and heavy expectations on ourselves, and it's just really unhelpful for our mental health. So, when I think about like the common examples that I was telling Sarah before, like moms that I'm working with, it's what everyone is out there listening experiencing, right? Like you're having a baby or you have a baby and you have toddlers at home and you're navigating that transition, and or you're going back to work and you have a partner that you're managing and a household that you're managing and the invisible load of all the things. And in doing the juggling act of all the things, we want to be good at all the things. And that's where, for me, I let it creep out of control where the expectations get too high. And all of a sudden, I feel like I suck at everything. Anyway, everyone's feeling this right now. So I was like, let's get Sarah on here, hit it head on.
Okay, well, I know you said everyone's dealing with this right now, but because I have you, your listeners will be thrilled to have Emily Silver in the hot seat.
Oh boy.
And I think that talking through your current overload and your high expectations of yourself, I think a lot of people will relate to, because even though the specific load items that they're taking on or trying to manage might be a little bit different, the concept and the overload is the same essentially. So
yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit more about you right now? Like, what is the overload that you're experiencing? What are these expectations that you're having of yourself?
Do you want me to just give you like a brain dump of all the things in my head?
Yes.
For everybody, this is easy for me to do. People who know me know I'm not afraid to share. I'm going to totally hijack this though, aren't I? Everybody knows I have anxiety. Well, unless you're a brand new listener and this is your first podcast. Hi, I'm Emily. I have anxiety. I always have. It was it was worse when I was pregnant. I really struggled postpartum after my first two, a lot better after my third. I'm telling you this because in the last month, I feel the expectations feel high again. And I notice it because I feel some anxiety. It's not bad. It's there. I'm pointing to
Mhm.
my eyes if you're watching this because I did a podcast or listened to a podcast with Mel Robbins and they talk about the alarm. And my alarm is always like behind my eyes. So I noticed that. And then I started to try to actually think like, why am I feeling this way? And I'm like, feel like there's so much going on at work. I'm working a lot of hours because I want to, because I love my job so much. But I also like don't want to miss anything at work. And I'm managing a lot of people and I want to be there for everybody and everyone. And I'm trying to do that too because I love it so much. And then there's my kids, two of them are in school. I have the baby who's with my nanny, who's very helpful, but from like setting up play dates to managing birthday parties to we've had a lot of pediatrician appointments and I just like, am I showing up enough for my kids? I certainly am not showing up enough for my husband right now. I hope he won't listen to this. He doesn't really listen to our podcast, but like, we haven't had a date night in a while. Like, I'm starting to feel like I'm trying to do, I suck at a lot of things right now again, but I know everybody goes through this.
Yeah. Okay. So work and then home, and then like home meaning your well, let's just say there's work. Then there's home in terms of logistics. You mentioned like birthday parties and maybe some planning things just around keeping home life going. And then of course relationships, like your kids and your partner. And I noticed that in that swirl of things, you actually didn't even talk about yourself. like when like is there Emily taking care of Emily in the
This is
scenario you
actually
just
so embarrassing. There's an appointment that I need to have with a doctor, and my husband keeps being like, "Did you make that yet? Did you make that yet?" And I'm like, "No, I have to make Grace an eye appointment. I have to reschedule Maddie's pediatrician. The dog needs to be groomed. I haven't refilled a prescription." I'm like, when I do all that, then I'll do that.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. So all the things, right?
All the
And
things.
all the things. And I teach a class called Make Time for You, and it's kind of funny because I've been on my own exploration of managing all the stuff in life, especially as the stuff has expanded as a multi-business owner and as a mom. And one of the things that I has almost like hit me in the face is there's no amount of strategy or there's no planner, there's no golden planner out there that will solve the problem of too many things. So it's actually really good what you just shared with me, because part of what is important is to, when we talk about mindfulness, we talk about seeing things clearly. And for women and for moms, we have this swirl and we see things clearly when it pops into our head. Like I've had, when you think of something and you're like, oh my God, this is so important. And you're like, I should probably write it down, but it's so important. There's no way I'm going to forget it.
Well, hold on. There's that, but also for people who work in my office will know, I do write it down, but I like to write it on a napkin or a Post-it or a piece of paper that just dissipates into my purse or the universe.
Yeah.
I'll do it. Jamie will be like, "Oh, you wrote something down? Where are you gonna put that?" I'm like,
you're like, I think I just blew my nose in that really important idea I had.
I do that too. I'm like, there's no way I would forget that because that's so important. Like a pediatrician appointment.
Yeah. But you do, because it's too much, right? It's too much. So,
too much.
I think
too much.
it's just too much. And the visual that I really love is, if you can imagine someone with their arms outstretched, trying, and it's like slowly you start to put things in their arms, right? So first it's like maybe you're hanging a bag on their wrist, and then maybe you're hanging a bag on the other wrist, and then you're putting a box in their hand, and then you're putting a box on their elbow and their forearm, and then you're putting it on the other side, and then you're balancing a huge bag on their head, and then you're actually having them squeeze their arms together, and then they're picking up their foot and trying to hold something on their ankle, right? Like that image is pretty much what we're trying. It's a physical representation of what's happening in the mind, right? There's just so much going on. And I like that visual because it when we think about the body and physically putting stuff down, it helps us actually get concrete with the mind, right? So when you can physically carry that stuff for, I don't know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then you're like, oh my
I
gosh,
think
my
a mother
muscles
can
are
carry it for a few hours.
for a few hours, totally, right? Like
A mother
yeah,
can.
a mother can carry it for way longer than anybody else. But at some point, she has a few options, right? She assesses all the things she's carrying and she says, you know what? Like imagine like this is your groceries, right? And you're like, you know what? I absolutely need the pouches because my kid's only eating pouches right now. But like these, I don't know, this random chocolate bar that I picked up at the end, like whatever, I'm going to throw that. Or maybe the chocolate bar is necessary for you, whatever it is, right? You quickly kind of discern, like, I don't need to carry this anymore.
Right.
And that's an option. Or you actually ask someone for help. I'm like, hey, Emily, can you come over here and grab this bag? So with our mind and the life stuff that we're taking on, we have to be able to see things clearly to then be able to discern, can I put this down? Do I want to put this down? Or should I ask for help? Now, what happens is that, like, just to go with this analogy is, say the bag that's hanging on your hand, oftentimes we don't even know what's in that bag. Like the bag is like, for you, it's like grace. You've got a grace bag and you've got a Maddie bag. And in the grace bag, not only do you have the doctor's appointment, but you also have the, like, I don't know if this is you, but like say it's something like really want to make her baby book from 6 years ago. Like, just like throwing out all the stuff that might be in the grace bag.
Yeah.
So it adds weight. So we have to get this out of our head. So when you're like, can I just give you a dump? I'm like, yes, like, please, because we can't look at it with a discerning eye until we see it for what it is. And then we have a moment of pause and we say, actually, like, this really isn't important to me right now. So you made a comment, something like, well, I'm working a lot right now because I really love my work. Well, that's amazing, but I don't think you love all the parts of your work, right? Like there's certain parts of your work that you love, but if you were honest with yourself and you looked at your schedule, and I know you and we both do this because we've been like partners in entrepreneurship for a long time, where we have to do some real assessment of like, this is not something I need to be holding anymore. This is not something I need to be carrying anymore. And this is a constant check-in type of thing. Right. And for our growing babies, the same thing, right? Like I used to really like making their lunches or something like that. Or maybe I used to really like doing this particular thing for them. And now it doesn't matter to me anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So things shift and change.
It like sort of reminds me of changing over the clothes. That's actually something that I was doing over the weekend, was like going into the girls' room, taking out all the clothes that are not seasonally appropriate, changing it over, making a donation bag, but then saving clothes for other kids. Like it was a big project. And where I'm going with this is that that's a project that's really big, and like you purge and you gut and you do it and it feels good. And then you're good for a season and then you do it again. And so like for me, I feel like, well, right, I know that what I feel right now is temporary because I've been through this before and I am not afraid of asking for help. In fact, my husband does a lot for me. My nanny does a lot for me. My mom does a lot for me. I'm not afraid to put the bags down. I guess I'm wondering, like, I was wondering if I could avoid this predicament, but maybe I can. It's like the clothes and the seasons that you change over, right? It's like, I address it and I'll do it. But like, it's not a one and done. It's like with sleep training, like you sleep train your baby and then like 6 months later they get sick or they teeth and then you have to do it again. And parents feel like kind of bummed because they already did that. Like, why am I here again? So like, I'm having that moment where I'm like, why am I here again? Even though I know I shouldn't have that moment, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, this brings us to expectations, right? So number one, like coming back to that image, is if you were to physically look at any human carrying that much stuff, you would not logically expect them to be able to hold it for that long. You might be like, my bet's on the mom, right? If you put a few people in, if you, like, just because she's determined
My
and
money's on the
fucking
mom
strong,
always.
my money's on the mom for sure. And you'd also be like, realistically, I know her arms are gonna, like, she can't hold that for very long. So, but when it comes to the holding in our mind and our emotional holding, we can't, it's not so tangible. So our
Mhm.
expectations are beyond unreasonable, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then, so our expectations, there's two types of expectations we're talking about. There's expectations towards ourselves, and then there's expectations outwards. So you're saying, okay, well, so my expectation maybe is like, I have to do all these things and I have to have these clothes like turned around and what's in the drawers needs to be the appropriate size and the appropriate season. And I want to do that because that's like what a mom should do, or just like it's something it matters to me, whatever
No,
the
I
reason is.
don't want to do it, but the clothes are
They have to do
overflowing. They can't fit in the drawers.
They
I
can't fit in the
avoided
drawers.
it for a long time. I don't actually want to do it, but I had to do it.
Yes,
All
you
right,
have to
sorry.
do it. So,
I'm just screwing around. Keep going.
and then there's this, I'm sensing this like, the heaviness and the resistance around when it comes around again.
Mhm.
Right. And I think what happens is so in mindfulness, one of the core teachings is that this sounds a little depressing, but I think it's actually very freeing, is that to be a human being is to suffer. We all suffer. But what causes suffering is resistance to your present reality. Right. Or another way to say that is you're just always craving something to be different. So the clothes season comes around, you're like, here we go again. Like, and you're in such a place of resistance. So the
Right.
expectation in some ways, like it's not supposed to come around again. Or the expectation is like my kid is supposed to figure out sleep once and then that's it. Right. Even though maybe logically you're like, no, that's not true. We still have this resistance going on and this expectation that things should be different than they
Mhm.
are. And that leads us to a struggle, but it compounds the frustration that comes from not upholding our own expectations, right?
Right.
So the expectations are are a big problem. So
Yeah.
I'm curious for you, when I think about expectations, where do those come from for you? Like, where do the expectations, you can pick one, like personal or business, right? What types of expectations do you have of yourself? And where do you think those came from?
Where did they come from?
Like, do you have I need to be a good mom, or I want to be a successful, or, a on top of things business owner, or I need to be doing all the things. Like, what is
I
happening for
think
you?
like the way that I'm wired and the way that I've always been is that I need to do all the things because I love
Mm-hmm.
all the things and I want to be good at all the things and I want to like effectively help anyone that I cross paths with, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I want to do all the
So
things. I want to do all the
you
things.
want to do all the things because you love doing all the things and you want to be good at all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And you also really want to help all the people.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not that I'm like, oh, I can't give that up. I know other people, I know that moms that I work with sometimes tell me like, well, I can't give that up because I'll do it better. I don't like feel that I do things better. I tend to be the other swing of things. It's like, well, I'll just do it or I'll keep it because I don't mind. I'll just do it.
Right.
It's okay.
Right.
Right.
Right. And when you do that, right, what is the consequence to that? When you say,
The
I'm
picture
just
of
gonna, I'll
the
just do it.
person that you just described carrying all
Right.
the bags.
Right.
And somebody's like, hey, want me to grab a bag? Like, let me help this lady out. I'd be like, I'm good. I got all the
Yeah.
bags.
I mean, that's why I love this image, because if you could, like, I could see you, Emily, like waddling over to someone in the street and being like, do you want me to carry that for you? Or do you want me to help you open your car door? Let me just put down my 900 pounds of things and then I'll help you and then I'll pick it back up. Right. Like it really, it
I did
really.
actually, I was coming home, I'm dead serious, coming home the other day, and I have like the kid on a scooter, Eloise in the stroller, the dog with me, bags from Whole Foods, and backpacks. And I was literally like bumping my stroller up, holding the baby with my groceries. And my neighbor was like, "Can I help you?" And I was like, "I'm good."
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
I did not even be like, "Sure, help me."
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, there's two, I mentioned when we were talking about this call, I mentioned there's an author. We'll have to find him in the show notes because I meant to look it up and I I didn't. He's written two books that I've only read one of them, but one of the books is called, just the title alone is called Who Not How. And I love that title because it basically, for you, it's like when I'm overwhelmed, it puts you in the mindset of like, not how do I do this, but who can help me with this, or who can offload some of my load, right? So even just like, I don't even like, for in one way, you don't even need to read the book. It's just you should, because it sounds like a good one. But just shifting that mindset of not how can I carry this extra bag, but who can help me carry this extra bag? Or who else could carry this bag, right? That's the first one. And then the second one, which I mentioned, which maybe is a good time to introduce, is called The Gap in the Gain. And essentially, it's so if you're watching the video, I'm just kind of holding my hand up as like modeling a set point, right? So this is where we're at right now. This is where Emily is right now. Okay. And what's happening is Emily and everybody, mostly myself included, fall into the trap of comparing ourselves to this ideal version of ourselves. So Emily is comparing herself to the amazing Emily who has all her ducks in a row and is holding all the things and is being the super mom and being the super neighbor and being the super business owner and being the super nurse and staff member, whatever it is, right? And when you are comparing yourself against that person, you're always in a place of less than, right? You're always in a place of not measuring up and self-criticism and self-doubt and lack and exhaustion, because you can never get there. Because if we actually take a step back and look at this ideal version of Emily, she doesn't exist. It's so unrealistic, right? She is not like a human that would exist on this planet. And she is like the robot version of the person carrying all the things, right? She is a machine, and you are not a machine. You're a human being, right? And then an important piece to mention is that when you kind of maybe even get close to achieving this ideal expectation of yourself, guess what happens? You bump that ideal version higher. So all of a sudden, well, if I'm doing all of these things and I'm managing all these balls up in the air, I might as well pick up a new one, right? Because I have to compare myself to some unrealistic expectation. So it's not fair to ourselves. And we do that all the time, right? So what the other side of it is, back to this, where you're at today, if you look at where you've been, where you've come from, that when we use that as a comparison, as a benchmark, we're in something he calls the gain. And I really think this is important, especially when it comes to what we've taken on, because so many of my clients and your clients and myself, right, we have kids and they bring in, even one kid, you have a kid, they bring in so much extra stuff, not just logistical stuff and things you need to buy, but they bring in a ton of learning and education that you need to figure out on your own and with support and listening to the podcast, right? And then they, of course, bring the emotional stuff with that too. And so all the stuff that you were managing before, right? Now you have this whole new world of load, mental, emotional, and truly physical, right? And we expect ourselves, there's this ideal of like, oh, I expect myself to just be managing exactly how I was before, even though I've taken all this extra stuff. And back to the body analogy, your muscles can only do so much. Like, they're trained for a certain amount. If you add another 100 pounds, at some point, something's got to give. Yeah. So that is so important.
By the way, Sarah, that's literally most of our parents, how they feel after having their first baby. And like, they're trying to go back to work. And I see it right there. Like, their life was so different down here.
Yeah, totally. And you're trying to stay 100% at work. I mean, I see that so often with my working parents where they go back and their expectations of themselves as an employee are just as high, if not higher, because now they want to prove that they're just as good and they still deserve their job. And yet,
Right.
right, they don't have the time and energy and resources that they used to. So I think when we look at where we've been or what's happened, it's like, oh my gosh, I had a kid that brought all this new stuff. And so
Mhm.
I need to have some grace with myself. I need to actually see this clearly and understand that I can't uphold this expectation anymore because some of us, before kids, especially my high functioning perfectionistic moms, were
Mhm.
doing a pretty good job of hitting that ideal. And then
I
when
bet.
they raised it, guess what? They did it again, you included, right? And so it is so dysregulating when they're like, oh my God, my whole life I've been upholding to this expectation and now I just can't. And so what do I do? Right. So it's really kind of there is a bit of a reckoning with that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think just the perspective of this alone is where you start, is to say, okay, I need to look at all the things that I'm carrying, essentially, have a mindfulness moment where I look at them with curiosity and I ask myself, is this important to me right now? Is this something that I need to be doing? Is this something someone else could be doing? Is this something that ever needs to get done? Like, does it even
Right.
matter? Right. And also honoring where you've come from that has brought you to this place.
So that I love and I can absolutely get behind. I'm laughing because I'm thinking like talking about the mom that you're like, I'll go a little higher, I'll go a little higher. And it's like, how high can I climb? And really it should be how low can I go? Right? Like I can get down with
Yes.
that. When you
Oh my
describe,
gosh.
and for those of you who can't see Sarah and you're listening, you can watch this on YouTube later just to see what she's doing. But when you put your hands out, and then you show your hand going lower and think of it as this concept of like, if I think of myself right now this week and how I'm doing and where I've come from, like that feels pretty awesome actually,
Yeah.
because I've come really far on a lot of ways, right? Like logistically speaking, my life is so different now. My company, the NAPS is different. Like a lot of people work here. We have a lot of nurses who work here. Like work is so different. I have 3 kids. Like physically, it's different, but also like for me, and my anxiety and how I would have navigated expectations or how I would have navigated this in the past is also like very different than how I would right now too. So that actually feels like that's a nice approach, right? It's a softer way to approach it too, because it comes like you can be more compassionate to yourself. And it gives me and hopefully anyone else listening that moment of like, okay, like I have things I have come from somewhere so different and so much has changed, but also like how have you evolved and changed in that process as well, right? Like old Emily would
Yes.
have spiraled on an anxiety train and I would have rode
Right.
that for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, I think you have to have so much, in every podcast I come on with you guys, I'm going to always talk about self-compassion because when you're looking at that, where have I come from? Some people might go to a dark place. Well, to be like, well, maybe I haven't, like, yeah, I have a kid, but like maybe I am not doing well right now, right? I feel like I'm not
Right.
doing as well as I was. And that's where I really the looking at the where you've come from, you have to give yourself a good amount of time, right? So for those postpartum parents, like if you're in that second, third month, like give yourself lots of grace and time because
Right.
you're in such an intense growth period, right? Every 6 months, and then I feel like it's in the first 6 months, it's really every month, right? But then it's the growth periods get a little bit longer for your kid and for you as a parent. But you're so much is happening in you as a human, in your own development, your own self-awareness, right? And also,
Yeah.
of course, so much is happening in your life with how your life is shifting and changing.
why do we do this? And you don't have to, you might not even have, I think there's a lot of theories or ideas around this, but I'm thinking about all the places in our lives that we go through this and I know that we're going to keep doing it and we can't stop it, but I'm just so curious around like, why do we, particularly women who are moms, set our expectations so high? We all do it. They're really high. Why are we
Yeah.
reaching so high? I do it. I don't know. Are we wired
I
this
mean,
way?
I think there are a lot of theories. I mean, it makes sense. Like women are, we are in a position where we're always trying to prove ourselves, right? I mean, look at the inequities that we have in just looking at wages in the workplace. Like
Yeah.
women have to, and then of course like I'm a white woman, so I have to maybe prove myself a little bit less than a woman of color.
Right.
But I'm still a woman who has to prove themselves, right?
Yeah.
In a world that is very patriarchal and has this intense masculine energy, right?
Mhm.
And so, I think, but there, if you're kind of into astrology right now, there's this whole like feminine rising right now. And this is so important because the society uh, pressure to go and drive the expectation to be higher and higher and try to meet that expectation is breaking down. Like people are breaking down. Burnout levels that are an all-time high. Our planet is not doing well, right? Things are literally malfunctioning. And so we need women to step in and start to honor this more, the rest, the lessening the expectations, because what's the point? Right? Like, what is the point of these high expectations? Because I think if you think about what is the ultimate goal? It's like, well, I would rather a mom set an expectation on how she's feeling day to day and how many people she has in her support system versus how many flat loads of laundry she's folding, or whatever it is, or thinking about what actually is the value that you want. And when you think about the back to the image of all the bags we're carrying, I think that the emotional and sense of groundedness bag, right? That type of focus and weight, that should really be the bag that we're making sure we hold on to, for sure. Like, how are you actually feeling in your day-to-day life? And so, one of the things I want to mention, and this is a podcast I think would be so fun to do, is around this. Women are cyclical beings. We're all cyclical beings, but women, like, we have a 28 to 30-ish day cycle if you're cycling. Then we're in a environment with nature where we have the moon cycle and the season cycle and then the cycles of nature. And yet there's this expectation that we're on all the time in the same exact way. Right.
Yep.
So you said something around like this part of the month, I'm feeling a little more anxiety or something like that. Like we've talked about this before, is that, we could go down a whole rabbit hole of like, tell me where you're at in your cycle. And let's look at the moon and let's look at what's going on in the season and the energies of your children right now. And really seeing that full picture to say, at this point, like it's actually like in general, we need to set that bar low, but maybe at this part of the month for you or in this season, like coming out of winter, the
Yeah.
bar is extra low. It's extra low because, you don't have those funny beach walks that you normally have that keep you grounded. You know what I mean? So
Right.
that's a bit of a can of worms, but the punchline is that, it's a programming issue that if you're feeling it, I'm feeling it, and probably every single female listening to this is feeling that pressure, we can safely say, and we all know this to be true, even though sometimes we still internalize it, this is not our fault.
Right.
This driving ourselves to exhaustion to reach unrealistic expectations is not our fault. But we can't get pissed about that. We just need to heal it. We need to say, I unsubscribe, and this is how. I'm going to put these bags down. I'm going to say no more. This isn't working. It's an outdated model of being that is just, it's wearing us all out. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant, but
No, I love it. I love it. I'm getting like logistical in my head and thinking, okay, so we all know, because I've shared, I'm holding too many bags, and people are listening and they're thinking, I'm holding too many bags.
Mhm.
What I want to give people like a tip or a tool to get started because it feels overwhelming. And already I'm thinking like, okay, I'm carrying too many bags. I put one down. How do I decide what to put down? Like when you had mentioned like a dumping out of like what's in Grace's bag and what's in Maddie's bag and what's in Eloise's bag. Is that actually what anybody listening could do? Like literally, do you just dump it all out onto paper and then decide, like look at it and be like, okay, like I can put that down or that doesn't need to be held right now. And that does? Like, is that you know me, I'm
Yeah.
like, how do I do it? Tell me what to do. I'll do it.
Yeah. I mean, I know you guys have talked about fair play on a podcast before. And what I love about that is, the fair play, like Eve Rodsky's model has like, she's kind of broken it down just to really actually help you see all the things you're carrying. Like I have the card deck. I think it's super helpful. But because oftentimes, like, if you unload the bag, so to speak, there's going to probably be a dozen items that you forgot because they're just like, they're the things that you're going to think about at 3 a.m. Right.
Yeah.
But I think that in general, like for me, when I do something called a weekly design, and I sit down and I do a mind dump and I say like, and I actually designed my own planner to support my specific personal planning system. And I do have it chunked out where I have like, these are the top 3 to 5 work things that I'm focusing on. These are the top 3 to 5 personal things. Sometimes it's a little bit more that have to get done this week. But then I also have like this is where I'm at in my cycle. This is what's happening with the moon. This is what's happening with my kids this week. Maybe there's something big going on. And maybe there's something big in the world going on too, that I like want to just note to honor that, like in the scheme of this week, it's not just about these 6 things, so to speak, that I'm carrying. There's also all this other stuff going on. There's all these other forces at play. And then the other most important piece is like, what am I doing for myself? It's like, what is like, and that's actually where it's sometimes easier to get that to-do list out, but I would really encourage people to say, what am I doing for myself this week to help me actually keep the muscles engaged? But yeah, I mean, that's the actual process of discernment really is what you're asking about. Like, how do I figure out what to hold and what to pick up? One way you could think about it to get really laser clear for yourself, especially if you're someone listening that's like, I feel like everything's important.
So I was going to say that. I know that there'll be people listening who will say everything's so important, or like, that sounds nice, but I can't let a bag down. Like, I just can't.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say, look at the season of life you're in and what's going on for you. And almost like the question of like, what would I grab if there was a fire in my house? Like you've done this for me, Em. Like, so like, I feel like especially in like postpartum, you'd be like, Sarah, is your baby eating? Are they sleeping? You did this recently when Sage was sick. And I loved how you said, like, what's going on for her? And you said, the pediatrician's going to be unimpressed. And I was like, it was such a great way for me to get out of my own head about like how everything was, concerning. You're like, oh, actually, like if they're eating and they're sleeping and they're like, get back to like core basics around what's important. It's like, and then you might actually be like, you know what? What's actually important is that I just spend time with my kid this week. Yeah. Right. Like this happened last night where I was cleaning the dishes and Livy was like, Mom, can you please just come do this? And I was like, 1 more dish. And she was like, I'm going to count. She gave me to 100. She goes, I'm going to count to 100. And I had a moment where I was like, oh my God, she is setting a timer on me. And I love this kid because I don't need to wash this 3rd pan, right? What I really want to do is go like, I want to go spend time. But I can see how you get in the moment with the pan. Like, it's like the to-do list for me. You made me realize like, oh shit, I haven't really done something for myself recently. Yes. I've done things that I've enjoyed, but they were like with my kids or other people. It's really easy to like, dump the to-do list and be like, when I'm done the to-do list, then I'll get to myself. Just like it's easy to be like 1 more pan and then I'll play with you. And so it's like, I'm also laughing at you that you told you that your pediatrician would be unimpressed. It's like the classic nurse over here. I'm really good at helping other people. Like, I wish I could practice a little bit more of what I preach. Well, it's the triage model. Right? It's the like, what is the most important thing right now? If I look at my life and I'm super honest for myself, and I hate to say this, but go gruesome. Like, if there was a fire right now, like what's the one thing in my house that I would actually care about? You might be like, oh, it's like, my kids. So that's the most important thing. So everything else can get put down. Or if I was going to get hit by a bus tomorrow, and go to that point, because that should be your hub. And everything else comes around that, right? So
Right.
do the most important thing first. Put that most important thing on the calendar first, the date night, right? The date night, the special moment with your kids. The number one, the thing for yourself. Like I make sure I have at least one. It's a color on my calendar. It's a particular green. I make sure I have a certain green block on my calendar every week. And that is like something particular that I like. It's like a therapy session or a massage or something like that. It's like a signed up thing that I've committed to.
Just for you.
Just for you. Just for me. And then of course I pepper around that with my regular meditations and things like that. But
Right.
that is where you want to start. So I would actually really use that triage model for your own mental load and emotional load and physical load discernment.
I am loving this concept too, of how even just how you organize your week, and you're like, this is what, a couple things for home, couple things for the kids, couple things for work that I like really need to get done, and hello, the thing that is for you. Because
yes.
I would be willing to guess that most people listening would agree with me that that's always the last thing on the list, or the thing that just doesn't get written down. Always.
Totally. And you have to schedule it. And I just said this in a group I was talking to yesterday in my Inner Work of Peaceful Parenting series, which is one of the questions I ask is like, what are your top self-care practices? Like, I call them almost like your oil and garlic, like the two main ingredients that will always make you feel good, like those token ingredients.
Sleep. I just want to sleep.
Yeah, sleep. Most people to sleep.
Give me a cold, dark hotel room alone, and I'll just sleep. That'd be great.
Yes.
That's what I want to do.
And that's your number one thing when you look at your week, right? Prioritizing sleep in this season of your life, right? It's so important in all seasons, but
it's all seasons,
and then you have to schedule it. Right. In all seasons, family. And you have to schedule it. You have to put it in. And then the second question that I make sure people see is, who is going to help you with this?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like self-care and doing that thing for ourselves every week. We don't want that to become this burden for ourselves. We want to get into a regular habit where we have the support team that helps us do that 1 or 5 things, whatever it is. And so we start to feel the benefits of it, and it doesn't feel like a burden anymore. It's just part of who we are. It's like, oh, I'm Emily and I go to bed at 8 and sleep in a dark room because that's who I am.
Yeah. I love going to bed at 8. It's wonderful.
I feel like I've won the day if I'm in bed by 8. So old.
I have won the day when I crawl into bed with Maddie in the bottom bunk and rub her back, and I fall asleep.
God,
and I wake up. Either my husband comes in and is like, are you sure you want to be here? And I'm like, leave me. Or I wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh my God, I just slept like 12 hours.
I love it. That sounds so good.
This is very helpful for me. So thank you. I feel that I perhaps have hijacked the podcast, but hopefully somebody listening can relate to me and understand and think about their own expectations. Or maybe what bag you can put down. I think this is
so for you, Em. Let me ask you a quick question. What is one way you can soften the expectations on yourself, or what's one expectation that you can question or put down?
There's something I can put down in every facet of my life in a way, right? Mm-hmm. Like I actually feel like if I dumped out everything going on at work, there's something that I can outsource and put down. If I dump out all the things going on with my kids, there's 100% something I can ask my husband to do or my nanny to do. I think the biggest glare for me that feels like a little called out and embarrassing is like, what have I done for myself? Like I actually didn't sign up for any of my workout classes this week or last week. I have stayed up late doing things for other people. Like I need to that's actually what I really need to do is pick one thing, even if it's 20 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. And come at that with so much compassion because it happens all the time. We say begin again, right? It's happen again because that's our default mode. That's our programming.
Yes. Old Emily would have struggled. New Emily, like I put some bags down and I'm feeling like I'm going to leave this podcast and hopefully everybody else out there can leave and we all can set our expectations so low that we just trip on over them.
Well, and you have come so far. So if someone listening is
yeah.
having a hard time noticing their gain, please talk to someone else who can see it for you, because Emily can see hers, but you and I have both been in positions where we haven't. And
No
so
way.
you need to reach out to that person who can say, dude, remember where you were?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Especially as someone who's had periods of really troubling anxiety. Like when you're in it, it's really hard to see out. So, oh my goodness. Well, I want to be mindful of your time. And as we said at the beginning, you and I could literally talk all day. Let's tell people how to find you because you're just so awesome. So if you are on social media, Sarah dabbles on social, but you're there. You have great content.
Yeah. The School of Mom is the School of Mom. So I have decided for my own time and attention to not physically and mentally be there myself, but I am putting some content up there with my team. But we also have Parent Wellness Group too. If you're looking for a therapist in the Mass or Rhode Island area, we have couples, individual, and group therapy. And then School of Mom, I'm about to launch a new program called Untethered, which is for women who have very hard, struggling relationships with their mothers. And of course, I have my signature program, Mothering Oneself Mindfully, which starts in October next year. And we're going to start to pre-enroll. And it's just my heart and soul there. So
I love that
to welcome
program. Jamie went through it. I went through it. Jamie's in it again.
She's in it again.
Moms go through it, and it's such a wonderful program. It's so helpful. So
yeah.
And so outside of social media, we'll link Sarah's both websites for both companies in the show note. But that's the School of Mom and the Parent Wellness Group. You can also find her on a Google search when you put those words in because you're all over the place. You're a low-key celeb. She's a badass bitch.
I did this thing called a Scream.
Thanks for my personal therapy session today, Sarah. Really appreciate it. I'm going to go put some bags down, put my bar low, set up a little something for myself.
That's awesome. Just lie down. That helps you. You put everything down and you go under the bar and you take care of yourself.
I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to get under the podcast booth and take a nap down here. And everybody upstairs will think I'm still on the podcast. Oh my gosh. Well, I love it. And this is Sarah Harmon. And thank you so much for being here. And thanks to everyone for listening. And I will see you next week. I'll be back with Jamie. Take care, everyone.